Welcome to Beans on Borscht. I'm sure I'm pronouncing that wrong, and Hanna will put me right. This is a podcast where two cultures clash, but come together at a shared love for online exposure. So welcome to episode 1, and I think we should just very quickly introduce ourselves.
My name is Hanna. I live in Kyiv, Ukraine, and I like to talk about a lot of different things.
My name's Matt. I live in between Manchester and Leeds in England, and I have many interests we'll cover over the course of this podcast. Yeah, obviously welcome Hanna. You're somebody that I work with remotely and have got to know through employment, but never met. And I guess what we should really explain, there's some vast differences between your social, political, economical situation, some ways of living that are vastly different than mine, despite being, two Western countries. Do you want to go into that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So I'm in Kyiv, living in the active war zone. So I get to say stuff like, oh, it was just the usual missile, not the nuclear one, which you can't. And I'm so happy for you.
I obviously see headlines of what's going on in Ukraine, and working for a largely Ukrainian company, I get this sort of weird insight into how it's affecting the people that I know. Media over here, when it covers something, it covers in large sort of brush strokes. So it'll be if there's some sort of attack in a particular area or something scandalous and something that shouldn't be happening, whether that is a potential war crime or whether it is a scandal.
Or like a really gruesome attack, for example, when they targeted the maternity hospital or just the children's hospital, when it's something massive and really gruesome, something that will be very catchy in the media.
Yeah, of course. And that makes sense just in terms of the model of how sensationalist media is kind of set up. What I do think is quite interesting is the conflict sort of has been going on for 3 years.
Almost 4, going on 4.
February
Yep.
it'll be 4, is it?
Yes.
Brits, we have very little insight into what it means to be living in some sort of conflict. The nightly reminders, because they are normalised very quickly, it loses its potency in the media and therefore falls from sight. And I guess what I see is the fatigue and the impact on you guys.
Of course. And I see what you mean. If it's not on your news, it's not happening. But I actually have some statistics for you on just the amount of drone attacks or drone strikes on Ukraine since the beginning of the war, because they haven't been using drones from the very beginning. They haven't even used ballistic missiles from the beginning. It was a bit different. And in 2022, there were only like 1,100 drone strikes in Ukraine in a year. Then the next year, just 800. 2024, almost 11,000. And now it's 2025 coming to an end, and we've got almost 50,000 drone strikes on Ukraine this past year.
What is a drone strike? What is one? I know that may sound like an elementary question, but because there will be some people that would listen to this, they might have some idea as to what that means. What's the actual effect on you? How does it manifest?
Sure, because I think that the phrase drone strike might sound like actually the drone striking like the building or something. But what we mean by a combined attack, basically, I'll give you an example from last night with some numbers. So a combined attack is when they use ballistic missiles, regular missiles, and drones, bomber drones. And maybe you know about it because like the West thinks that if they use the word drone, it makes them like war ready. And I think drone is just like a very common term now when it comes to war. There are different kind of drones. Some of them called FPV, they're really small, like seriously small, like that copters that people use to record a nice video of a river or an ocean. And those are surveillance drones. And then they can carry like some explosives, for example, but they are only used on the front lines with the actual battle going on. The drones that they use to attack cities like Kyiv or Lviv or Odessa, like big cities, when it's used to just wreak havoc and terrorize civilians and hit the buildings, bomber drones, and they are huge. If I were to explain or try to explain the scale of one bomber drone, it's like a little car. They are massive, and sometimes they're worse than missiles. Missiles are massive. And what they would do for a combined attack is we'll get a warning before even we get the air raid alarm in some news, Telegram channels. They are monitoring the situation. We'll got a warning that, hey, like the fighter jet in some very distant Russian city has taken off because we have like radars and that fighter jet carries ballistic missiles, for example. So we know I'm in Kyiv, and I know that the missiles will, if they are aiming towards Kyiv, it's going to take approximately 2 or 3 hours for them to get to Kyiv. So you can actually plan for this once you get used to it. There's a whole schedule. It's very routine, honestly. It gets so routine. Like you memorize the names and the types of the fighter jets and the different kinds of missiles, and you know how much time it takes from different Russian cities. Some are closer to the Ukrainian border. Some are so distant, like up north in Russia. They will have like an airfield, and they will use it to take the jets up in the air.
You know, I have this abstract idea of war because I've never been near one, that it must be like the front lines of the Somme, this terrible random acts of violence that suddenly befall you. And I guess there is still that element of random destruction, but it just seems to add an extra layer of horror to me that it is almost bureaucratic in some sense.
Exactly.
You're able to set your timetable according to the scheduled bombings or scheduled drone strikes.
And it's just when I say that it's a routine and that it's normalized and it's such an integral part of your day to day, it's ridiculous because, as I said, you learn the names, and all it takes is for me to see in some Telegram channel MiG-14. I know that it's the type of plane that carries ballistic missiles. And I see, like, it literally takes one word for me to know, oh, okay, I have 3 hours. Cool. Or, for example, you learn the types of the missiles. And the scariest ones are called kinzhali or daggers. So you see the word dagger, and you're like, oh, okay, bathroom now.
Where do you go to the bathroom? Like, what's special about the bathroom?
Oh, yes, exactly. So it's not, I don't recommend it at home. Please, if you are ever in Ukraine or in an active war zone, always use a proper shelter, like an underground parking lot, or a subway station. We have plenty subway stations in Kyiv. But the most important part when you're at home and you're under attack is to never stay close to the windows or just the walls that are facing the outside. There's this rule called get behind the two walls. So try and put yourself out of harm's way as much as possible. And the bathroom or the hallway of your is usually the safest place to be if your building should get targeted by a drone. If it gets targeted by a ballistic missile, the bathroom won't cut it. But yeah, you see one word, and it's literally is so simple because you know the difference when you see XA-53. This is an old type of missile. It takes a long time to get here, and it's like less destructive. And you're like, oh, okay, fine. Like I can skip this one and just keep making dinner, for example, in my kitchen. When you see dagger on Kyiv, you're like, okay, yeah, now I need to hide.
To me, it is so difficult to comprehend the idea that you could be in such danger so quickly. I would wonder though, to what extent has the normalization of this incursion impacted your own stress levels? Like, have you just naturally had to plateau and you're just like, oh, do you know what? This is just how it is. Or are you still as you were, three odd years ago?
Interesting question, because it differs for everybody who still lives in Ukraine. Like, I have friends who get scared and anxious whenever they hear an air raid alarm, and they do all the precautions and they go to the shelter because they still maintain that same level of alertness and fear as in the beginning of the war, when it's all brand new and you are literally have no idea what to expect. I got accustomed to this super quickly. And the only thing that changed that to like the level of stress is whenever something like a drone or a missile it hits really close to where you live or to where you are. Yes, it can kind of scramble your defenses, as it recently happened to me. Because it is kind of scary to hear the explosions. It is scary to hear how the air defense works on the missiles. It's literally, you hear all sorts of sounds. You hear gunshots, you hear the fighter jets in the air, you hear other missiles that are trying to intercept the ones that are going your way. It's loud, scary, it's very war, but it also has an element of comfort because you hear the sounds that are meant to protect you, like the air defense. And then there are sounds of just the drone approaching, like a whistling noise, very annoying. And to me, I was just annoyed by it, not scared. 3.5 years. But then the drone strike very close to my building, and now I get this primal fear every time I hear it.
I see it in talking with colleagues like you. I actually remember the first time when the conflict started. First time I was on a refinement call, and a colleague said, I have to end this call. The air raid siren's going off. And I was like, okay, fair enough. That makes sense to me. That makes sense. You need to end your call. You need to go get yourself safe. Anyway, 15 minutes later, they logged back on. And they were in the air raid shower on their laptop. And I was like, what are you doing? You're okay to miss this meeting. It's fine if you are not present. But I guess from what they explained to me is they just wanted anything to take their mind off it.
Yeah, that's partly, that's like one part. You really do want to get your mind off things and not just sit there and worrying. Another part is just it happens so often that we can literally cannot afford to skip meetings or to take days off every time after an attack. It comes and goes in waves, of course, and we had super quiet periods in Kyiv that lasted for a few months that also add to the overall levels of anxiety because you get so used to it. And when they remove that element of predictability from you, you're like, okay, where are the missiles? Where are the drones? And you start to expect it.
What's the general behaviour when you see each other? Do you go to coffee houses and find yourself arguing or consoling, or do you just not at all mention it? It's just something that you are all dealing with in your own way.
Oh, I do. There are plenty of people who, by now, are so tired of media coverage because in Ukraine we still get plenty of media coverage about the war, right? And people get fatigue from it and they get tired. And if they decide to stay and they're not leaving, they need to cope. And a lot of people have it as their coping mechanism. They just shut down from the news and they will say to you, I don't read the news. Wake me up when we win, or wake me up when the war ends. So they shut down. And I get the feeling why you would want to distance yourself because you literally need to protect your mental state and your emotional well-being from being exposed to so much horror and suffering and deaths and all of that you see every day. You need a balance. But yeah, some people, we now, when it's been 3.5 years, some people would just be like, I don't really read the news that much. So they don't talk about the war when they go to a coffee. Some people are then more involved and have the stamina to follow like where we are on the front lines and what's happening with other countries. How do they still support Ukraine? Were there any new scandals with Trump? Someone view changed or shifted? Like, what's Germany thinks of you supporting Ukraine? Are they still on our side? And if you do that every day, if you don't shut down from it, yeah, that's just like another conversation that you'd have, along with the weather.
Well, you mentioned weather there, and that's something us Brits can wax lyrical on all day long. But sadly, we are running out of time. But I just wanted to say a big thank you to you, Hanna, and thank you to any listeners. So this is a goodbye from Hanna.
Goodbye.
And a goodbye from me. Goodbye.
Thank you for listening to Beans on Borscht. May the noble art of podcasting prevail.